My name is Catherine Bertini, and I'm a distinguished fellow at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs, and I welcome you all to this panel discussion today. We especially appreciate that our members and our sponsors are joining us via Zoom for the discussion today. I want to remind everybody that the Chicago Council on Global Affairs is a nonprofit, independent, nonpartisan platform, and that the views expressed here by any of us are expressed by us as individuals, and they don't represent institutional positions or views of the Council. So with that in mind, the Chicago Council is hosting this conversation as part of a series, and the series is sponsored by the Consulate General of Japan in Chicago. We certainly appreciate very much the Consulate's strong support for these events. This is an opportunity to reflect on the power of sports and sporting events such as the Olympic Games, and to promote socio-political change and build a more equitable world through sport. I know the whole world is excited that Japan is hosting the upcoming games, and so it makes total sense that the Consulate General of Japan in Chicago is therefore sponsoring this as part of the run-up to the games, and that they've made this possible. So thank you very much to the Consul General, Kenichi Okada, to Hisayo Matsumoto, and to all of the staff of the Consulate for their participation with the Council on this important topic. And thank you for your government's leadership with the Olympics. As our moderated conversation today, members of the audience will have a chance to ask questions. Please visit ccga.live if you'd like to ask a question of our speakers. So now I get to introduce to you the speakers, Jennifer Cooper and Mao Yamaguchi. Jennifer is a development specialist at UN Women, and she's spent her career working with the United Nations on issues like these that we're about to discuss. She's been with the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, and with UNICEF, the Children's Fund, before she became a political analyst and program development specialist at UN Women. She leads the partnerships that UN Women has with global sports organizations, including the International Olympic Committee and FIFA. And she works to harness the massive power of sport internationally to challenge gender stereotypes and to promote opportunities for women and girls throughout sport, something that's critically important. And I would also like to mention that one of her partners, FIFA, has a female director general, Fatma Samora. And having come from the UN myself, I can tell you that Fatma was a logistics officer at the World Food Program once upon a time in her career. Mao is a research fellow at the Nippon Sport Science University, and she participates in a governmental project for expanding the number of nations and regions participating in the Tokyo 2020-2021 Paralympic Games. She works on the program for strategic bilateral partnership through sports, really an exciting program. She's also previously worked at JICA, the Japan International Cooperation Agency, which also for some years was headed by a very dynamic woman, Sadako Ogata, who before she started that job was the head of the UN High Commission for Refugees. So thank you, Mao Yamaguchi. Thank you, Jennifer Cooper, for joining us. We're going to hear from each of them for the next 25 minutes and then open the floor to any questions that come in. So we'll call on Jennifer first. You have the floor, Jennifer.
Great. Okay, it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much to the Council for organizing this program and for inviting me. It's an exciting time at UN Women. Last year, 2020, was the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action, which is an important, well, the most important sort of Bill of Rights for women internationally. And, you know, 2020 was a tough year, and so we were going to have massive celebrations, you know, to commemorate this 25th anniversary. Some of you may recall that in 1995 in Beijing, Hillary Clinton said the famous words, women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights. That was the start. That was a major piece. That was Beijing. And as a result, we have this international agreement. And in order to sort of push for more change and to finish the unfinished business of Beijing, we're calling on a wider range of actors to help us to do that, to drive gender equality around the world. And so we've launched something called Generation Equality, and within that, Sport for Generation Equality. And this year is, of course, a big year because of the Olympic Games taking place in Tokyo. We know that, the Olympics has half of the planet watches the Olympics. It's an important way to show that, it's got one of the biggest audiences in the world. And so when we have such an opportunity, this year will be about 49% of participants at the Games will be women. And in our relationship with the IOC, which we've been cultivating over many, many years, we've been supporting them and working with them as they've done a tremendous job of promoting women's leadership and driving gender equality through the International Olympic Committee and then down through the various sport federations. So, the IOC's headline objective is to have equal representation of women and men on its executive board and in the composition of its vice presidents by 2024. And in 2013, the IOC commissions were made up of only 20% females. And now in 2020, that number is up to 47%. A couple of years ago, the IOC president, Thomas Bach, who has really been instrumental in leading the IOC to become a more gender equitable organization, he was appointed by my organization, UN Women, as a he for she champion. So as a male leader within a pretty male dominated world, that is the world of sport, once he took on this role, he really began to personally embrace this and understand in a kind of personal way the importance of what he was doing and what he had the power to do. And through his leadership, we've really seen a transformed IOC. I also have to acknowledge that FIFA has also come a long way, and that in the Women's World Cup in 2019 in France, it was also watched by 1.2 billion people around the planet. This was the most watched women's sport event in history. And so, in this case, I think, the solid investment that made it happen really brings together and shows sort of how commercial and social interests really can be very complementary in the sports world. There's still a very long way to go, but we've seen so many positive developments of, major players, international players within the sport world, promoting women's leadership, women's participation, and also taking steps to drive gender equality in other important areas that I can come back to. I just want to mention before handing over our Sport for Generation Equality framework that derives from the Beijing Platform for Action. It's composed of 6 principles. First of all, promoting women's leadership and governance in sport organizations, ending violence against women and girls in and through sport, creating an equal playing field through equal economic opportunities for women and girls, a bias-free media with equal participation for women as also journalists and in the media. And then finally, promotion of an equal playing field for girls, because it is girls who get left behind and don't necessarily have the equal opportunities to benefit from sport. And there are so many multiple benefits that sport can bring to girls through their participation, as we've seen demonstrated very clearly here in the United States through the important impact over the long term of Title IX legislation, which created those equal opportunities for girls in sport through the education system. I'm going to pause there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And thank you for reminding us about Title IX, also what a difference it made for women's sports in this country. Of course, there are many countries that have had girls athletics for quite a while, but there are many more countries where it's still a huge struggle, and it's a struggle. It's a struggle here also, for sure, to be sure that girls and as students have the right kind of opportunities and scholarship opportunities and everything else. So there is a long way to go, but much progress, especially since Beijing. And I'm glad we can look back at Beijing and look at some of the points that were raised way back 25 years ago, and see that there is progress, but still use it as a kind of almost like a charter for where we still need to move, including our topic today in sport. So Mao Yamaguchi, please give us some opening thoughts.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and also the council that holding such a wonderful session for all of us. And as a representative, hopefully said a representative from Japan, I'm very honored to participate in this session. And also Japan is going to host hopefully in this year, 2021, nobody knows, but I'm going to introduce or can share about what we have done as a government or as a the school which I used to work and expanding the participants of the countries which have never or less participated in the Paralympic Games. Also, I would like to share with our initiatives, which is called Sports for Tomorrow. It's enacted 2013 when Japan was selected as a host country in 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games. That is very important initiatives for our government, also our Japanese as a citizens to move forward to realize the equal worlds in terms of, as the Jennifer said, gender equalities, racial equalities, and also regional disparities should be eliminated through these sports initiatives. So for those who've never heard about Sports for Tomorrow, let me just introduce briefly. So this is about the government initiatives that Japan is going to develop to help development internationally, especially in the country, low and middle income countries, to promote sports. And in 100 countries, more than 10 million people, for aiming the equal worlds in gender, in race, or any other eliminate any other discriminations. So including governmental entity, private schools, and NGOs, all the entities, players join together in this Sports for Tomorrow initiatives to take an action in each fields, in each levels, to realize the equality or world peace through the sports. So it's actually achieved recently, the number, but also it's still sustained to after or during and after the Olympic and Paralympic Games. So we're still, in this situation, it's quite hard. People cannot move around easily, but we're trying to connect with the people who they've already worked together to move forward, to find ways to be a better society in each community. So so this is our initiatives that we are now trying to move forward. All right, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you very much. A follow-up, may I ask, is this part of the JICA programming? I mean, in other words, is it part of the aid program of Japan that sport is now added and equality in sport is added to the initiatives that they're working on?
So this is not a part of JICA, but JICA is one of them. So JICA is one of the organization who's also managing one of their programs under this Sports for Tomorrow initiatives, as a committee, voting committee. So so there are different, I'll say organizations join together and work. So JICA is of course, they're working independently, their programs with the ODA, but also SFT is another strong initiatives, just only focus on the sports and the physical education field.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then is that also gets into your work on the Paralympic Games too? Is that also part of the government initiative?
Exactly. So we got a certain amount of the fund from the government, the Sports for Tomorrow fund, and to initiate our programs in different countries, especially in those developing countries, to let these country or athletes, coaches to participate in the Paralympic game in 2020. And that is one of the legacy the government think to host this Paralympic Games in Tokyo 2020. So, yeah.
Yeah, good. And that, of course, comes into the issue of equitable sports. We're talking about gender, but we're also talking about opportunities for other abled people to be able to participate.
Exactly. So in this country, of course, there are, religious problem, like the women cannot join the sports or these physical activities, but also the people in physical disabilities, they also have been struggling with access into the sports or these physical activity because of their mindset, or the people's like societies. They have kind of biased because they think, like one of the countries which we visited, like Maldives, Bhutan, they have kind of mindset that the people with the impairment shouldn't go out from the house. They better sit in the house to do like housekeeping stuff and then not go out because it's kind of dangerous, because they don't know how to, handle, how to take care of them outside the house. So they kind of fear about it, but it's actually kind of, wrong mindset sometimes. Once we introduce like para sports in this country, and they just realize that, there's a possibility, or they have like they need to have a chance to, to do sports if they can. So it's all not only about, whether they have some disability or not, but they also have like the mind disability as well.
Right. But the opportunity, what you're doing is helping to work on giving them opportunity and understanding that this can be done.
Exactly.
I remember once seeing two young girls in a poor household in China when I was with World Food Program, and the family only had money to send one girl to school, to grade school, and primary school, and they chose one over the other one because the other one had been born without some of her fingers. So that was why the girl with all fingers got to choose. And I thought about that when you're talking about opportunity. If only families understood that there are opportunities, whether it's for the mind or the body, for all of their children. That's what you're working on.
Exactly. Yeah, they're kind of fielders.
Can I shift to Jennifer and come back to the Beijing questions, issues too, because obviously equal pay is one that's been on women's minds forever, and certainly a part of the Beijing platform, and it's one that we've seen play out in women's sports quite often. It's exciting to know that for instance football is becoming so popular, and as you said, that more people watched the World Cup women's final than any other women's event ever, but even they are still fighting the fight for pay equity. So one of the questions, in fact, it's already come in from the audience, is how sport can lead to more conversations about pay equity.
Yeah, thank you very much, for that question. That, yeah, of course, one of the highlights, headlines coming out of the Women's World Cup, besides it being this tremendous, very popular sporting event, was, I've never in my life heard chants from a stadium of equal pay coming from the audience. And also when the women's national team came home and they had the ticker tape parade here in New York City. That was also, the biggest sort of line that was put out. So, the U.S. Women's National Team launched a lawsuit on International Women's Day also. So that was a little bit of a nod to the international struggle. In speaking with my colleagues at FIFA, it's not super easy answer, to just go for equal pay. In terms of prize money, the disparity is huge. There's no doubt. But what's happening is that we're starting to see more investment in women's sports to build greater opportunities, and to sort of share out those resources. So there's a little bit of more of a nuanced conversation around this, I think, that needs to take place. Although the objective of equal pay is certainly what we as UN Women stand for. But in addition, because of the high visibility and these athlete activists who raise this in such an effective way, what they did was to generate, as you say, more of a global dialogue on this issue as it applies not only in sports, but also in general. We still see a tremendous gender pay gap in every country in the world. And so it's not something that's limited to sport, although I have to say, just throw out a little data, it's pretty bad in sport, which is, Forbes every year tracks the top 100, highest paid athletes. So far, in the past number of years, there's only been one woman on that list. And that happens to be Serena Williams. And she was not there in 2018 because she had a baby. So, and also some data conducted by Sporting Intelligence, the survey 2017 is the latest data that I have. But it shows that among elite athletes that women earn only about 1% of what the men earn. So, so going back to this thing about the power of sport, when we see such gaps and such disparity, that also sends a message out into the society because of the power of sport to be able to shape culture, to be able to shape people's understandings and perceptions of one another. So on the one hand, sport has the power to make a big difference and to address this issue. We're starting to see some movement in that direction, not quite enough, not fast enough, but some. And, I really hope that this is going to continue because, like I said, this is something that has sparked this conversation. And I don't think that the women athletes are willing to go backwards, and certainly the women of the world are not either. So again, that's why this is linked very much to these objectives of Beijing and why Sport for Generation Equality is calling on those actors in a position to do so, including advertisers, sponsors, et cetera, to really start to step up to close this massive gap that still exists.
Well, advertisers, then, would you take that just a step further? What's the role of the business community in this context?
Absolutely. This initiative of Sport for Generation Equality is really aimed at the entire sport ecosystem. So it's not really just about the big organizations like IOC and FIFA and the big federations, although they're really important players. And I happen to, I've developed these principles in close consultation with the partners at the IOC to make sure that they were appropriate. But definitely, the business community has a very strong role to play as the sponsors of the major sporting events. Also, through the kind of marketing that they put out and how they portray, how they get women athletes as to sponsor them, for endorsements. That the rate of sponsorship, I think it's something like 4% of sponsorships for athletes go to women. So again, there's a huge disparity there, but also in the representation through the advertising. UN Women runs another initiative called the Unstereotype Alliance, and that has the objective of getting advertisers and advertising agencies to develop non-sexist marketing. So, this is something we also want to see the sponsors embrace. And we've seen some really good examples too of some wonderful commercials that have been running on national air or internationally that portray the power of women athletes and really embrace that and show those positive messages, especially to not only the young girls who are watching, but also to the boys, which is also important.
Absolutely. Yes, very important too. And how many times have we seen or heard from girls who say, well, I never thought I could do this, but I saw somebody so-and-so do this, and
Oh, and she changed my life.
who is,
Sure. I say from the voice of a little girl, I saw Megan Rapinoe, and she's my idol, and I want to be her now.
Yes, 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 makes a huge difference. Well, let's circle back to the topic also of leadership in the management of sport and the Olympics. Now, I'm going to take from what Jennifer said, but then ask Mao a question, because Jennifer in her opening said that Thomas Bach, the head of the IOC, is been a leading force, as I understand what she said, behind the movement toward the goal of having equal representation of women and men at on IOC committees. Is that correct? So now, of course, since we're talking about Japan and its management of the Olympics, we have already questions coming in from the audience about this, because we've all seen we all saw the reports about some of the comments of Mr. Mori, and then of his resignation in Japan. And now I think there's some new news that Mao can break to us. One of the questionnaires have asked about it, but Mao, tell us what's happening in Japan about leadership. And also, I think that the questioners are asking, is the change in leadership, is his stepping down and the new leader mean that there's more attention to gender equality and to gender sensitivity? So Mao, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. So I think the world now, they're getting paying attention about our movement, Japanese Tokyo Olympic Committee 2020. So since there was a huge storm about the resignation of the President Mori because of his sexist remark. So at the moment, I just figured out there are two issues that we have in Japan. The first one is people are kind of ignorant about the sexism or gender equality. So I think because of his remark and the media just they took it up. So people just realize, oh, that is a sexist remark. And there could be a problem now because of the high profile this issue, because the Olympic Games coming in. So the world now getting attention about our president remarks specifically. So there's one thing, people are ignorant about the gender issues. And another issue is our nature. Japanese, I don't know, it's totally different from Western culture, but our culture, it's more very quiet in the meeting. So if the boss saying something stating, the people just listening and try to agree what he said. It's kind of hard to refute during the meeting, or they just they're fearing about the action to be taken by the boss if they refute about that. So there are two reasons why I think this issues has been, how to say, it could be one signal for Japanese government or Japanese as citizens to think about the gender issue and gender equality, thanks to this criticism, not within Japan, but also internationally. So the pressure from the different countries push us forward, as well as the sponsorship. When you host the Olympic and Paralympic Games, they need some fund, the grant from the company or volunteer, and also they need to manage the media to boost the movement. But they also got criticism. The media condemn about the sexist remarks. So we all together to give a pressure to his comment, as well as the members' attitude. So I think now people realize about the sexism, what is the sexism, what kind of behavior or the statement could be discriminative in terms of gender. But the second point, that is our nature, is kind of hard to get over because it's kind of long-lasting issues. So unless we get over this old traditions that people should speak freely during the meeting, no matter which position they are. Otherwise, it's quite hard, even though we know the sexism or know the gender equality is important, but it's quite hard to move forward, take an action, thinking about the gender equality.
And there is a new director now, or head of the committee. Yes.
So right. So Seiko Hashimoto, she's a new director. She's now top of the committee, Tokyo Olympic and Paralympic Committee, since today, and she was selected because of under the clear and transparent procedures. But before her, there was one guy, Mr. Kawabuchi. He also used to be a member of the Tokyo Olympic Paralympic Committee, but he was secretly selected. Well, within the community, there was no indication or no public comment about him, but he just came up after him, and now people are again just surprised and start refuting the way they did. So now hopefully she, as an athlete and also as one of the cabinet ministry in the cabinet, has this power and try to promote not only this movement about this, against the sexism, but also try to take an action that people can freely talk about their problem, not only limited to the gender issue, but also physical and also pay equity as well. Good.
Well, we all look forward to her leadership and her success, and the success of the whole committee, because it means the success of the Olympics, the Olympics globally. Jennifer, I didn't know if you wanted to comment on that at all.
Just briefly, I mean, I think it's this stirred a conversation, let's say, the comments, and my colleagues in Japan, we have an office, a liaison office in Tokyo, and they were reaching out to me, how can this be happening? And, civil society protesting, also, there were some comments from other foreign embassies in the country, et cetera. So it was very much out of line with the kind of values, Olympic values, especially with this gender equality agenda that the IOC has been successfully pursuing for so many years now. So, I contacted my colleagues at the IOC, what's going to happen. And then they were explaining there will be actually a transparent selection process, which is good. The fact that it turned out to be, an important partner of ours too, who was a former minister for gender affairs. This signals, I think, attention to the issue. And I really do hope that this is going to translate into other changes, like we were talking about. How can sport be a driver for gender equality? That this is going to go beyond just the Olympics, which is obviously a huge event, very important for the country, but that it can also lead to some meaningful change in some of these issues that Mao was talking about that still require being addressed within the context of that culture. So we're very optimistic, and we look forward to working closely with the new president.
Wonderful. Jennifer, I want to expand on another audience question. Well, obviously, we started audience questions beforehand, but since we have to ask questions, we might as well include the audience as much as we can. So one of them, as I said, I want to expand, but they're wondering whether or not the Olympics in Japan this year can in any way be used as an opportunity to promote human rights issues, as well as ethnic and gender equality, especially in countries like China. But I'd expand it beyond China and really ask Jennifer if she could comment on how the Olympics are used, whether this year or in the past, to try to convince countries to allow more participation of all of their citizenry, whether through the Paralympics or whether through the basic Olympic Games, and how, I guess, how public pressure or the IOC or any of us can go about trying to use them to help countries open up more to all of their citizens.
Okay, big question, but yeah, I think that the Olympics in particular, because of the Olympic Charter, because of Olympic values, and also because of some of the rules that have actually been put in, for example, for Tokyo. And again, I go back to gender equality as my area of expertise, but parity and participation is important. Also symbolically, the teams as they come in, representing their nations, it will be men and women carrying the flag together this time. That, I think, is an important symbol about the importance of gender equality. So, there are these symbolic things, but those things can translate into real messaging, for these countries that are participating. I mean, there have been some other very big examples. This goes beyond my world, but in the Olympic Games that were held, there was a rapprochement in Korea that was very important, that was around and in the context of those Olympic Games. So, the Olympics also, every 4 years, they call for the Olympic Truce. And this is something that's held in, the United Nations headquarters. And during Olympic years, it's, there's a call for global ceasefire and Olympic truce. So the meaning of the games is about peace. It is about international collaboration. It is about bringing societies together and to strive for excellence together. So I think it's super important, and it has an impact on, again, how the societies, see themselves there through this kind of healthy competition that's in a spirit of fairness. And it's sort of, and again, trying to equalize and level the playing field. So, I mean, as far as what may happen in Beijing, which would be the host of the 2022 Winter Olympics, hoping that this kind of messaging can also penetrate. I'm also hoping that they're going to remember the Beijing Platform for Action and also take very seriously, go back to the legacy. I just want to mention one more thing, which is the importance of the legacy of the Olympic Games. In Rio 2016, we started a legacy program in partnership with the IOC for girls, and it's called One Win Leads to Another. And this creates opportunities for girls from the most vulnerable communities. And you may recall that there was some controversy about the Olympics and that there was social exclusion that was maybe being perpetuated by the games, and elites could attend, but many people in the society were left out. Right. So this was an attempt to create a kind of a social legacy. And in this case, it was the first time that there was such a legacy put in place for girls, so that we put together a curriculum and these girls practice sport twice a week. They learn also life skills in addition to their sport participation. And what we've seen is incredible, how these girls themselves, young girls, adolescents, are becoming leaders within their communities, agents of change, who are influencing their families, influencing in their schools, and influencing in their wider society. So, that's where we start. That's the bottom up. That's the power also of the Olympics, through creation of such legacies. And in addition to the kind of peace messages, equality messages, including also people with disabilities, Paralympics and such, and that's the power of sport.
Great. And one more question for Mao, and then I want to suggest we just have 5 minutes left. So I want a minute at the end to say a couple of words, but I ask you a question, Mao, and then ask you also if there's anything else that you'd really like to add that I didn't ask. And then Jennifer, I'll ask the same of you, if we could each take a couple minutes here at the end. But back to the Paralympics, Mao, I wanted to ask you about what is the expectation for those Olympics in Tokyo, and is it going to be the largest ever? I mean, assuming, we're all assuming in this COVID-19 world, and anything that you can tell us about the participation of women in that context as well.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Since we're kind of lucky because we host Olympic and Paralympic, and because of this, we have a lot of fund from the governments, not only sports, but also like everywhere to develop in those developing countries as well. So in terms of sports, and since I've been with promoting the Paralympic sports and para sports in developing nations. And from my perspective, it could be one of the biggest turning point for Japan to have the Olympic and Paralympic game at this point of the year, which, every country are paying attention. And now the people are aware about the gender equality and racial equality because of America's Black Lives Matter movement, and also the para sports now has been getting a spotlight as well. So I wish this game, Olympic and Paralympic game, could be the one to not only the legacy, just remain the legacy to. In terms of the gender equality, because of the number of female and male, almost been like half and half. Also, the country which it's going to be participate also to be the biggest in Paralympic. I'm talking about the Paralympic 164 was marked in London Paralympic, and then now we're looking for 165, more than 165 countries, and that means also racial equality, I think. So, but it shouldn't be stopping here, but it could be a start point for us to think more or to improve more about the equality in terms of gender, race, or people with an impairment. So it should be a sustainable movement from 2014 when the Japan has selected as a hosting country. So now we're not shifting because we haven't done Olympic Paralympic Games, but we have to also at the same time, under the preparation of this game coming up, but at the same time, we have to think about how we can sustain this movement in the future. It's going to be a long-term program for Japan to promote equality within the country, also outside the country. So now a lot of sectors, like international sectors or government sectors or private sectors, they're thinking about like how to collaborate to make the things bigger, make this outcome bigger. So there's a platform, as I said, like SFT, Sports for Tomorrow platform, to make the people join together and then take an actions by exchanging their knowledge, their experience, as well as implementing their action together with other organizations. So in this term, I think Olympic and Paralympic get us united. I mean, get all the sectors united together to attack the gender, racial, a lot of like issues, which we have been facing in the country and also outside the country as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Jennifer, do you have any closing comments?
Yeah, just a few things. Looking ahead, very excited about the upcoming Olympics, but just ahead of that, as the Tokyo Games were postponed, our 25th anniversary of Beijing platform were also sort of postponed. So we have a big thing coming up in Paris in June called the Generation Equality Forum. Of course, 2024, Paris will be the host city for the next Summer Games. So what we want to do there is we want to make some big announcements coming out of Sport for Generation Equality. there are some really important things that are taking place within the sport world that bring together this kind of ecosystem that I've been talking about. Many players to make some big commitments to drive gender equality in and through sport. So, in relation to the issue of violence against women and girls, there is an initiative on the horizon. It's active right now to come up with a kind of a global independent entity to specifically address this issue in sport. So this is kind of long overdue, and I think it's really important. And I hope that we're going to be able to announce something that's quite big in Paris in the lead up again to Tokyo. In addition, I would just say thanks for hosting this event. It's been a fantastic conversation, and I hope that for those of you who are listening and who find this sport for generation equality that it resonates, please get in contact. The information is there available on our website. And like I said, this is an initiative where we're reaching out to beyond sport organizations, federations, et cetera, but also to the business community, to the sponsors, teams, leagues, athletes, and also governments who have a very, very important role to play here. So once again, thanks so much for hosting this event. It's been a fantastic conversation. And thank you.
Thank you very much. And before we close and before I say thanks, I reminded that in 1995, I was at Beijing conference and I gave a speech. The title was Women Eat Last. And unfortunately, still this is the case in much of the world. But the reason why it's important, I think, in this context is that no athlete can do well unless they have adequate nutrition, unless they've had a chance to have food for literally their whole lives, starting when they're in their mother's womb. And so the Chicago Council, of course, has a program that I'm part of that does work on food and agriculture. But more importantly, for this conversation, the Japanese government, I understand, is also going to host a discussion about nutrition. I'm not sure when, I'm not sure it's known yet when that will be done, but in the context of sport, but leading into how we all need adequate nutrition. And I think that will be an important step forward. The London did it 8 years ago, I guess, at their Olympics, or 9 years ago. And I understand that Tokyo is going to do it as well. And it'll be an important reminder for the world that the reason why we can see these wonderful women and men do so well in athletics is because they did have a chance to have adequate nutrition. And it's important for all of us to promote that as well. It's also a women's issue because they are so often the cooks, and because when women are pregnant, that's absolutely a key time for them to have adequate nutrition, as well as when their babies are little. So I think we've come to the end of our time, and I want to thank first our panelist, Mao Yamaguchi. Thank you very much for joining us and for all of your information that you shared and your thoughts about these important upcoming matters. And Jennifer Cooper, thank you very much for sharing much good information for us and for the audience. To Consul General Okada, thank you for your support for this effort, and thank you all for participating, for listening, and to all the members of the council and the sponsors. Thank you.